David Campbell was a man of many things, according to many people. He was a drunk, according to a certain ex-wife who lived somewhere in Orlando, a bum according to his landlord, and if you were to believe the police blotter in the local paper, he was between a delinquent and a petty criminal. But there was one thing that David Campbell knew above all else, that he wasn't in any way, shape or form insane. He had a healthy share of vices like any honest man would, but even he knew for a God-honest fact that he was as solid as they came. Perhaps this was why, one frosty morning, the appearance of the voice came as such a surprise. David had been in the middle of a deep, half-easy sleep, a combination of the after-effects from a night at Joey's down the street and a medication for an unusually painful bout of heartburn, when he first heard it. Unlike most voices that woke him up, this one was surprisingly polite, almost whispering to him as if trying its hardest not to disturb him.
Davy? Psst. Hey, Davy. Davy? Can you hear me, Davy?
A half-awake groan, followed by a dry, rasping snort as if for a moment he had forgotten how to breathe, was the first response.
What? Who is it? What do you want? Oh, you're awake. Good, that's good.
The voice seemed rather pleased with this, continuing in a chipper tone and impeccable clarity.
It's me, Davy. Remember?
David's eyes, still crusted with the sleep and buried in the comforting darkness of the yellow, stained pillow, barely looked up.
Ah, Jesus. You're the guy with the pickup from last night, right? Look, I friggin' told you. I didn't do anything to your stupid Tally. No.
The voice laughed, with a merriment that made David at least a little less tense.
Don't worry, Davy. I'm your friend, see? Your buddy, your pal, your number one. I've known you for...
The voice made an exaggerated whistle.
A real long time. Okay, granted, you might not remember me, but I know you, Davy, and that's all that matters, really. What do you want?
David murmured, rolling himself over. His barely focused thoughts turned to the fact he was sleeping on a bare mattress, and he muttered an inaudible derogatory about cheap-fitted sheets.
You want money, right? That it? Haha, nope. Like I said, Davy, I'm your friend. And brother, the only thing I want to do...
The voice paused for a second.
...is to help you. Help? The hell are you talking about? Let me be clear, Davy. I want to help you. That's the only thing I want. No strings attached, no money down, no nothing.
The voice spoke with the energy of a master car salesman. Energetic, peppy, but with a friendliness so genuine that it bordered on heartfelt compassion. Although it sounded much more pleasant than the clunky Polish cursing of Mr. Kowalski, or the grating nasally whine of that god-awful Miss Donovan, the next unit over. It was still far too early for David to even consider an articulate conversation.
If David Jack Campbell can look himself in the mirror and smile at what he sees, then that is the only thing I'd ever need. You understand me here, Davy? Are you from that goddamn charity? How many times do I gotta tell ya? I ain't interested in living in a group house with a bunch of freaks. Davy. I'm saying this to you man to man. I'm not from any charity. I'm not from the church. And I'm not from the state. I'm not trying to scam you or shake money from you. I'm coming to you as a friend with the offer that all I want to do is give you a little helping hand. The only thing I need, no, the only thing I want is to help make you the best type of guy that you can be. All you gotta do is give me a chance. If your life doesn't improve in any way by the end of the week, I'll leave. Leave? If nothing in your life even slightly improves, Davy, I'll leave. Hit the road, beat it, pack my things and go. You'd never hear or see me again. I promise.
Perhaps somewhere in the alcohol-depraved recesses of David Campbell's mind, somewhere between semi-lucid coherence and the childish notion that he was indeed just hearing things. What the voice said sounded like a genuine offer. It certainly wasn't like his life couldn't stand a few improvements. A new car sounded nice. That would be an improvement. A couple extra bucks in his bank account wouldn't hurt anything. Hell, he'd even settle for getting a new place. One where he didn't have to deal with neighbors who'd whine like toddlers, just because he parked a little funny. And if this really was just some kind of dream, some figment of his imagination he was hearing in his sleep, what was he going to lose anyway?
All right. Fine. You can help me.
He yawned, one which turned into a harsh, rasping cough.
Or whatever it was you said. There we go, Davy. See? You're already making a good first step.
The voice let out a warm laugh, and David thought he heard it clap its hands together in satisfaction.
Now, I'll admit I took a few little liberties ahead of time, but it's nothing you wouldn't have done anyway, you know? Nothing major. But trust me, Davy, old buddy, old pal, you're going to be a different man at the end of this. I guarantee it. Honest to God. Great. I told you I accept. Now please, just get out of here and let me sleep. All right?
As his eyes finally adjusted to the greyish haze of a February dawn trickling slowly into his room, David noticed that he had been the only one in the room. The encounter with the voice was soon easily forgotten in the light of day. After a prolonged debate of whether to remain in bed and nurse a budding headache, or to get up and use his bathroom, David had dragged himself from his mattress to shower. Against a backdrop of soap scum-stained tiles and hot water, he had written off the whole conversation with his new imaginary friend as the consequences of a rough night that had followed an even rougher day. It wouldn't be the first time such a thing happened. Just 2 months ago, he had a rather vivid dream about the old, withered spinster of an 8th grade math teacher shrieking at him about a wrong long division problem. Today wasn't a day to sit and think about make-believe people. For a man who recently found himself once more joining the unemployed, an incident involving a foreman at the furniture factory across town, and a misplaced hammer accidentally winding up within said foreman's windshield, David had himself a busy day. First there was the matter of breakfast, followed by going down to the credit union on 74th to appeal for another advance, and then stop by Tommy's. The Tommy's by the rail yard across town, of course. Not the Tommy who the other week gave him a black eye over 1 or 2 grand, related to a misplaced bet on the Mets. Since he no longer had steady employment, a blessing and a curse as David believed, he would have to earn some cash in the interim. If he could convince that guy with the stupid haircut at the bank to float him a few extra bucks, maybe he could swing by the Diamond, play a little blackjack, put a few safe bets on whatever games were going on. Maybe...
Campbell!
On instinct, David flinched and grit his teeth when he heard that voice. Coming up the creaking steps was the short, fat form of Mr. Kowalski, lumbering up the stairs like an intoxicated penguin. His bald head, from which only strands of grey hair barely covered a mess of liver spots, glimmered in the morning sun, and David could see the veins on that flabby turkey neck bulging with every step. That meant Mr. Kowalski had something to say to him.
For what? What do you want, Kowalski?
David had known the man long enough to have dropped any real or faux attempts at politeness.
Look, I told you on Saturday. I'll have the rent by the end of the month. You don't have to keep working me about it, all right? No.
Kowalski had climbed only 11 steps, and yet the poor man looked winded. It took all of David's willpower not to laugh at him panting and wheezing.
You paid me the rent the other night, remember? I just come here to tell you that you're double parked again. Donovan and the Carmichaels, they complained to me about it, that they can't park.
A quick glance out the window confirmed it. David's car, a 1991 Taurus in the cheapest shade of beige one could imagine, and held together mainly by desperation and patches of duct tape, was parked in a rather obtuse angle across 3 parking spaces. He had managed to get the car home in one piece, an achievement he was proud of, and he did mean to move it when he felt a little more mobile. What was it to that old crone Donovan and those Carmichaels with the screaming baby? Couldn't they handle walking a few extra steps to the door? But David was in no mood to argue. It was too early in the day for him to deal with landlords and elderly busybodies. He pushed past his sweaty landlord, half hoping he'd tip the bastard back over like an obese pig, and headed down the steps.
All right. I'm going out anyway. But next time tell Donovan if she can't.
A thought suddenly struck him. Turning on his heel, David stared back at Kowalski with a look of confusion and realization.
Hold on a minute. What did you just say, Kowalski? Move your car, Campbell. You block half to the damn No, not that, you fat pierogi eater. The thing before that, the other thing, about the rent. Oh yeah, you paid it to me the other night. First time I ever got it from you by yourself without having to threaten eviction.
David's face turned from confusion to genuine bafflement.
What? No, I didn't pay you yet. I don't even remember seeing you since last week.
Kowalski's flabby face gazed back at him incredulously, his light blue eyes gazing over the shabbily dressed tenant before him, as if he had suddenly sprouted a second head.
You came to me on Saturday and gave me rent. Knocked on my door and gave me stacks of hundreds and 20s yourself. And before you asked for it back, I spent it. I'm surprised you didn't give me another hot check, knowing you.
David thought, trying desperately to search for any memory of what Kowalski was talking about. It was coming up blank, and not the kind of blank caused by a few too many, but a complete and total lapse in memory. His thoughts shifted, and he remembered that he indeed did have some money, but that was kept only for when he needed it the absolute most. If he had paid Kowalski earlier, then that would mean the money would have to come from only one place.
If I paid the rent, then that would mean...
David's eyes suddenly widened and, mouthing a silent flurry of swears, leapt up the stairs 2 at a time, past Kowalski and into his apartment. He tore open the top right drawer of his bedside cabinet and, pushing past bundles of worn yellow-white socks, bottle caps, and assorted junk, he pulled out a bundle of rubber bands that at one point held $825. David stared for a few seconds, as if expecting the money had just magically slipped through his fingers, and if he waited a second longer, the wad of bills would reappear in his hand.
What the...
He looked back into the drawer, desperately pawing through socks and broken knickknacks.
The hell did I do with it? It was in here. I never took it out. I never take it out. Maybe it fell through the... Oh, that was us. We took it, remember?
The voice returned with the same warm clarity that David had heard that morning. Although there was no one else in the room with him that he could see, David Campbell could hear perfectly the sound of someone else, a familiar yet distinctly different voice talking directly into his ear.
What? Who said that? I did. All right, look, I admit, I shouldn't have touched the money to start with. I probably should have asked you first. That's on me. But the rent was coming up and we... Who is this? What? Where are you? What do you mean you took my money? Whoa, easy there, Davy man. Don't get yourself all worked up.
The voice laughed casually and clicked its invisible tongue.
We talked this morning, remember? Course you remember. Now, about the money. Yes, we took it, and we used it for the rent. I know it was your rainy day money, but we did what we had to do. We? Who is we? That was my money. I don't know who the hell this is or how you're talking, but I know that you stole my money. That's what you did, not us. Hey, I told you I did some little things here and there before I talked to you. You got the money, kept it all safe, and then I went ahead and paid your rent for you.
The voice spoke as if it were a child doing a good deed.
See? Now you don't have to worry about trying to make rent. Keeps you focused, you know. Shut up! Shut the goddamn hell up! I didn't pay any friggin' rent, and you just admitted you took my money. I told you I'd do everything I could to help improve your life. Paying your rent so you have a place to stay sounds like a good improvement to me. You agreed, remember? I didn't agree to anything. I don't even know who I'm talking to right now.
Perhaps a wiser man other than David Campbell might have recognized the absurdity of his situation. But Campbell was a man who knew that his possessions, his money, had been for all accounts and purposes stolen from him. That simply wouldn't stand in his eyes, disembodied voice in his head or not.
How did you even know about the money anyway? You been spying on me? Like I told you before, Davy, I've been with you for a long, long time. I know everything there is to know about you.
For a split second, David felt like laughing. He considered, if not for a moment, he was still in bed and the voice he was hearing was the byproduct of some hangover fever dream. But the voice sounded so real, so clear in his head, that it couldn't possibly have been a figment of his imagination. No, there was someone talking to him, someone he just couldn't see, and the most baffling thing about the whole situation was that it sounded almost exactly like his own voice. The pain in his chest was coming back. The stabbing directly above his head made him suck air through his teeth. Again, the voice spoke, and this time, it sounded moderately chiding, like a schoolteacher.
Let's be honest with ourselves here, Davy. What were you going to use the money for anyway? Betting, right? You were planning on going to that diamond place later, weren't you? We both know how that would have turned out, Davy. Like every other time. Don't you feel a little better that you at least paid your rent on time and have a place to sleep? Remember, it's not like you have a lot of places left to choose from. Shut up! God damn, shut up!
David's fist hit the top of his dresser with such force that a bruise almost immediately formed against his knuckles.
You shut your mouth, you... Campbell! Who are you talking to?
David turned and saw Kowalski, his fat head peeking through the doorway to his bedroom. He looked in confusion at the tenant rambling to no one, and considered if this was simply the end result of a poor, squalid lifestyle.
You said you was gonna move your car. What the hell are you doing in here screaming at yourself?
David looked around the room from corner to corner, swallowing hard to desperately quell the burning in his chest. He didn't say anything to Kowalski, and he didn't look at him. Instead, gripping his now sore fist, he darted out of the now quiet room and hurried out the door towards his waiting car. The voice was much more present by Tuesday. It spoke to him when he woke up, when he used the bathroom, when he ate, when he watched TV, always talking in his head. It wasn't malicious or hostile, far from it. In fact, when it did talk to him, it was never anything more than a few pieces of advice, dispensed in the style of David's overbearing mother.
Wake up a little earlier, Davy. Can't sleep till noon. It's not too cold out today. Why not take a walk around the block? Been a while since the last time you got real exercise in. How about we try to get you some new clothes? People like a guy who doesn't smell like he woke up in the back alley of a bar, you know.
There were ways to make it stop. The voice would go away after a few aspirins or a quick drink. It was a temporary remedy, to be sure, considering it came back after a few hours. But any peace and quiet for David was good enough. To seek a permanent solution would, of course, mean having to confess that he was hearing voices, and he could scarcely imagine that the outcome of that wouldn't be anything good. The question of the where and the why of the voice still remained, however. Why did it sound like him? Where did it come from? How did it know him? If David considered himself a spiritual type of man, he might have thought it to be a kind of guardian angel, a man in one of those long white robes and big feathery wings. who was here simply because God needed David Campbell's help. In fact, out of curiosity, David had asked the voice if it was indeed a guardian angel, to which the voice only laughed and stated that it technically could be considered one, but wasn't exactly anything special. 3 or 4 aspirins made it go quiet after that. If the voice wasn't bothering him, it wasn't as if David would suddenly be free from problems anyway. For the past few days, he had been getting phone calls from various employers who, mind you, he had never even spoken to until he heard their voice left behind on his answering machine. They were usually for various jobs: mailroom clerk at an office building, delivery driver for a trucking company, and there was one about working construction on some kind of development the next town over. Some of them David outright ignored. Others were those awfully polite calls to gently let him know they were going to pass on hiring him. This was no surprise to David Campbell. A man with a record like his wasn't exactly going to be a star hire after all. But to the voice, it seemed to be a revelation.
10 different companies, and all of them rejections?
The voice sounded almost utterly baffled by its own statement.
It's unbelievable. I would have thought that someone would have at least wanted to talk to you. I know it was you sending out all those applications,
David said, focusing on the last few swigs of beer. He adjusted the thermostat, letting the warmth of the apartment briefly chase away a bout of sudden chills.
I don't know how you do it. Seeing as you don't got any arms or a body or nothing, half of the jobs you applied me for wouldn't even take a second look at me anyway. I mean, working in an office as a clerk? A truck driver? I wouldn't even waste my time applying. Davey, buddy, you're too good to spend the rest of your life working in a factory. I thought maybe you could try working, I don't know, somewhere new. Somewhere that you could have an actual chance of moving up in the world. I just didn't think they'd all reject you. I tried my best to make you sound a little more talented in your resume.
David laughed, both at the prospect of what the voice could have possibly embellished about a man who 2 years ago was arrested for disorderly conduct following a bad night out at the track, and how exactly the voice could have managed such a thing.
If you know anything about me, you know that I got some history. History that doesn't exactly make me look like I'm #1 employee. Oh, I do. There was that DUI back in '88. In '90, there was that community service for that fight. '91, you had that arrest and a week or 2 in the county jail. And then there was that thing with the neighbor's cat. All right. But you see what I mean? Companies don't usually jump after a guy like me. Besides, even if the job's just breaking boxes or whatever, so long as they pay me decent, I don't care. See, that's just the kind of attitude we have to change. You've spent most of your life so far going from one dead job to another, Davey. No real concern for the future. No drive to do better. You don't want to improve. If you just took a few minutes to... And that's another thing with you.
David snapped back, pointing his finger at what was just an empty space on the wall.
All you talk about is improving my life. And what have you done? You wake me up at the goddamn crack of dawn. You whine to me whenever I sit down with a beer. And you harp about me being nice to my dumbass neighbors. All you've done is
He searched for the right word for a moment.
Marvelize to me like you're my mother. If I wanted that, I'd go see her in Florida.
The voice's tone raised, a cross between pleading desperation and stern fury.
I am trying to help you. To help us. But you aren't trying. I've had to do everything myself for the past 3 days. Make sure your rent is paid, look for a job for you. I even tried to get you an appointment with that Dr. Winchell, but you just aren't co-op. Winchell? What? That psychotherapy guy I had to see back in the summer? Why the hell would you do that? Maybe he could help you, Davey. If you maybe went and saw him 2 or 3 times, probably check yourself in for a bit. Again,
David cut the voice off.
Oh, yeah. That's what I want to do. Tell that court-ordered crank doctor that I'm here because the voice in my head told me to. Yeah, that'll help me. I'll be sitting in a padded room with a guy who thinks he's his own mother. I'm trying to help you, Davy, old pal. I just want you to understand that what I'm trying to do is for your benefit. If you want what's best for me, then leave me alone. You said it yourself. If you can't improve my life in any way by the end of the week, you'll beat it, right? I said that, yes. All I need is to be left alone. Look, okay, I admit I'm not the most organized guy in the world. I get into some trouble here and there. But it's not like I'm some kind of monster. All I need...
David shrugged his shoulders and looked around his empty apartment, making a wide gesture to the invisible figure beside him.
...is a job that pays me decent. I can come home, have a few drinks, watch some TV, and go to bed. I don't care about anything else. I don't want or need anyone else telling me how to live my life. At least I can die the way I want it to live.
There was an overpowering silence. Although David couldn't see the voice, he swore that if it had eyes, it would be looking him up and down in deep consideration. Even the thoughts in his head seemed to pause momentarily, and he wondered if moving from the couch would cause something to happen. Finally, the voice spoke again. This time its tone sounded deep in thought, as if it wasn't considering David at all.
All right. I understand. You do? Yes, Davy. I get exactly where you're coming from. You have a life that you want to live, and I can understand that. I can't force you to do anything you don't want to do.
There came a soft, resigned sigh.
I guess we'll just have to try something different then.
David's head turned at such a speed that any faster it would have snapped.
Wait, what was that? Something different? What do you mean?
The voice didn't answer. Instead, all that answered David Campbell was that deafening silence and the sudden, sharp pain that once again reared in his chest. By Thursday, things had taken a turn. Not only was the heartburn in his chest more frequent, but the chills had gotten worse, and he had developed a fever. No matter how much medicine he took, the violent coughing or the horrible stomach pains didn't go away. Instead, he swore they got worse. His skin was caked in a layer of sweat despite the constant chills, and besides his usual scent of cheap cigarette smoke, he smelled of vomit. Although he hadn't eaten anything, or rather, whatever he ate refused to stay down, his body felt unnaturally heavy and sluggish, as if he carried some invisible weight. It was when David was curled up on the couch, draped in a crusty thrift store quilt, that he heard the voice yet again. It was gentler this time, quieter, though David could tell that it seemed to note his condition with a tone of interest.
How are we doing today, Davy? Seen better days, huh?
A low groan followed by a wheezing mucus-filled cough answered it. The voice, sounding like a healthier version of himself that gave the sickly man a sense of jealousy, again clicked its tongue.
Yeah, you look like you've been going through the ringer and back. Sicker than a dog, aren't ya? What? Come on, what do you want?
David wheezed, his voice choked between a cough and a gasp for air.
I'm sick. Oh, I know you've been sick plenty of times. Hungover sick mostly. But this feels different, doesn't it? It's like something, well, let's say someone, inside that greasy little head of yours is doing it.
David's eyes, crusted from a lack of sleep, narrowed at nothing, though he was sure the voice was standing right in front of him.
The hell do you mean, inside my head? What are you saying? You're doing this to me? You don't believe me, huh?
The voice gave a quiet chuckle.
All right. Do you feel like you're going to throw up in a few seconds? No,
David was cut off as, in only 2 or 3 seconds, The sudden urge to vomit overtook him. He retched and heaved into the battered plastic trash can beside the couch, which he had kept beside him for that exact purpose. He paused, and then a moment later, he did it again. There was pressure in his head, invisible hands beneath his skin moving and shifting, and every time he vomited, this pressure became worse and worse. At last, the pressure suddenly stopped, and David collapsed, shivering, onto the couch again.
See what I mean? I admit it's not something I wanted to stoop to, but if this is what it takes to get you to listen, what's making me sick have to do with anything?
David rubbed bile from the sides of his mouth.
Sure as hell ain't improving my life with me half dead here. Let's say I'm taking a more...
The voice paused, as if it was trying not to say too much.
proactive approach to our situation here, Davy. I tried helping you out at first, trying to get you to listen to me, but I think what you need is a bit of tough love. Tough love? Yeah, tough love. Making you sweat it out, whatever you want to call it. The point is, if you let me help you and you push through this, I absolutely guarantee that you'll come out of this happier than you were before. And if...
A wet, deep sniffle interrupted him.
If you can't, you'll still leave, right? We'll never hear from each other again.
Throwing his head back on the pillow, David sighed and rubbed the dull pounding in his skull as best he could. He wasn't crazy. He knew he wasn't, for God's sake. The voice was in his head, and it was talking to him. What day was it today? Thursday, right? That meant only 3 more days. If he could just make it through 3 more days of this, just 72 some hours, then he would finally get his life back to normal. All he needed to do was just play along as best he could, and then, at last, he could get some freedom. He had done worse. Hell, he worked a night shift at a plastic company half drunk without even sitting down. The voice, he felt, was expecting him to break. But David Campbell was a stronger man than some disembodied voice, something that wasn't even real.
All right, you win. I'll do whatever you want me to do.
David sat up in bed, ignoring the pain in his chest that reverberated through his body.
Just, what is it? What am I gonna do like this? Ha-ha! I knew you'd come around, Davy brother. Trust me, you and me are gonna make things a whole lot better. You'll see.
The voice's usual cheeriness returned, and for some reason, David felt the pressure in his congested chest tighten.
Now, the first thing I want you to do is real simple. All you need to do is to go to your fridge.
David, with knees shaking like a newborn lamb's, slowly stood up and, with a quilt draped around himself, shuffled into his kitchen and opened his fridge door.
Now, you're going to get the rest of your beer and dump it. Dump it? Yup, right down the sink. I don't know. Couldn't I just keep 1 or 2 for later? I spent 20... Ah!
The heartburn flared with such intensity, David doubled over, and alongside the grinding ache in his head, his stomach clenched in preparation to vomit. The voice spoke again, gentle but stern.
Open each can and pour them down the sink, Davy.
Mumbling furiously under his breath, David regained his composure and pulled a half-empty 12-pack from the bottom of the fridge. He lugged it over to the sink, slammed it onto the countertop, and began taking out cans. With a practiced hand, he cracked each one open and poured the frothing contents into the sink basin. The smell filled the kitchen, and although David was long used to the scent of spilled beer, it made his clogged nose twitch in disgust.
Why do you want me to do this again? Hey, the new David Campbell isn't going to be a drinker. No more boozing for him. We're gonna get rid of every last drop of alcohol in this place. That'll make you feel better in no time. Doesn't make me feel any better now.
The voice must have not heard that particular mumble, because it let David finish emptying the rest. Once the last few drops from the last can fell into the now hops-scented sink, David crushed the empty box into as flat a shape as he could make, and then started back to the couch.
Whoa! Where do you think you're going, Davy? I did what you wanted me to do. I'm going back to... You still got some left over. In the toilet tank, remember? Don't think I forgot about that. Oh, don't get smart.
The burning in his chest, this time far more intense, made David quickly reconsider. Swallowing what felt like stomach acid and shouldering the weight that now pressed down on his entire body, he surrendered himself and walked toward the bathroom. By Friday, David's health had completely worsened. What had been a painful but manageable fever had now become crippling, and the aches had become far more severe. He no longer breathed so much as produced hard, rasping coughs from deep within his throat, sometimes bloody. His muscles burned, and he was constantly thirsty. It didn't matter how much he drank, of course, as it always came back up in only a few minutes. David also swore that he had lost weight rapidly. 220 pounds had plummeted to 170 pounds in just 10 days. He had cut back on junk food and drinking, as per the orders of the voice. But that couldn't have been enough to cause such a drastic drop, would it? The voice had become more demanding. Over the past days, it had forced David to live on a strict schedule. In bed by 10 and out by 7. Never mind whether or not David had been up half the night, choking on his own coughs. Yesterday, the voice had him deep clean his entire apartment from top to bottom, a process that had taken well over the course of the day because of both his sickness and the sheer amount of dirt and filth. That was right after he had been forced to shovel the entire apartment walkway, from doorstep to lot, free of fresh snow. This had caught Mr. Kowalski's eye, seeing his usually slovenly tenant out in the dawn hunched over a snow shovel and, suspecting David of trouble, had come out to confront him. The voice had demanded David speak as politely as possible to the old Polish man, despite the exhaustion and rising fever, making David wanting nothing more than to break the shovel off Kowalski's dome. It whispered in his ear exactly what to say, and at the threat of collapsing from chest pain, he spoke like an obedient parrot. There were other things the voice had made him do, of course. Throw out most of his clothes, shred his cigarettes, even the ones he had forgotten about stashed in the car's glove box, after running them underwater, make some rather uncomfortable phone calls to people David had either cut off or had things to settle with. But what terrified David the most were the things he was sure the voice was making him do without his knowledge. There were times when he felt that long gaps of time had passed without any recollection. The other day he had found himself in the kitchen, throwing out food from the refrigerator, and the next minute he came in from the outside, shoes covered in snow and mud, and his body aching even worse than before. It wasn't impossible to suggest the voice was taking control of him. Maybe it had happened other times, maybe in his sleep, and he just had no idea. He would ask the voice, but it never gave a straight answer, too sick and tired to focus anyway. David was sprawled in his bed, limbs splayed out across the bare mattress like a wounded animal. His breathing was ragged and shallow, and his body felt paradoxically light and frail, while heavy and immense. The aching had become a dull numbness when he wasn't moving, and the taste of blood like hot copper lingered on his tongue. His senses seemed to have been fading rapidly, though through cruel irony, his fever and aches flared with the same intensity. As he lay there, half shivering, half gasping, the voice once more came to him.
Davy! Davy! What are you doing lying around here?
It was disgustingly cheery, seemingly oblivious to his condition.
Come on, get up! We're taking your car in. I don't know how much money we'll get for it, but to be honest, anything's better than that.
A low, pained moan answered the voice.
Huh? What is it, Davy?
It took all of David's strength to answer, and even then all that came out was a desperate, strangled rasping.
I don't understand. Understand what? What don't you get? Who are you? I don't even know what you are.
There was silence. Then, to David's surprise, laughter. Deliberate, slow chuckling that started slowly turning into booming, mirthful guffawing. For a second, David wondered whether the voice was laughing at him or at his questions, like it was some kind of joke he didn't get.
You still don't understand, do you, Davy, my friend? Of course you don't. I'm going to put this as simply as possible for you, okay? I'm David Campbell. You? Me? What? Well, okay, technically I'm not you, per se.
The voice reeled back a bit.
But I've got all your memories, the same face, same voice. Strictly speaking in the philosophical sense, I am you. I've been with you ever since you were a kid, Davy. Through every little thing.
The voice's tone became biting, nostalgic with a hint of sarcasm under it.
That time you were 8, and you slugged a rock at the neighbor kid, and he had to go to the hospital? I was there. When you were 15, and you stole those Playboys to sell to your friends, I was looking right over your shoulder. Oh, or how about when you were 23, and you made that nice Julia girl run out of your car crying? I was right there with you, Davy. Always right there, waiting for you to notice me.
David said something indistinguishable from a groan or a plea, but the voice ignored him.
You know how everyone's got that little voice in their head? Like a little version of themselves who tells them what's right and what's wrong. They give advice, tell them what to do. Basically keep them on the straight and narrow, you see? There are lots of names for it. Gut feeling, that angel on your shoulder, human intuition. I like the term conscience myself. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think, Davy? Of course, no one has to listen to their conscience. You wouldn't listen to me. In fact, you never listened to me, if we're being honest, even when I tried to be as nice to you as possible.
The voice clicked 3 times, and David felt his aching body suddenly seize, the feeling of something moving, sliding, right around his stomach. The heartburn came back, and with such burning heat that it felt like his chest ripped apart.
I tried to be more forceful. I admit I didn't like having to do it, but you're not an easy man to change, Davy. That's why one of us has to go. I hate to do it, Davy. Believe you me.
The pain only intensified. There was something moving, wiggling inside of him. He could feel it. David looked down at his bare, slim stomach, covered in sweat and the stains of vomit. And despite the raspiness in his voice, he let out the most agonized scream he could. There, pressed up against the skin, like pushing against latex, was the outline of a fully grown human hand.
But like I said, you'll be a new man at the end of all this.
At this, David threw himself from the bed, landing on his side before scrambling wildly to his feet. Though because of his weakness, he could only balance for a few seconds before immediately falling back to all fours. He stumbled down the hallway like a scared dog, choking and gasping until he reached the bathroom. The squirming had only intensified, like fingers grasping furiously at his flesh, his bones. Gripping the countertop, he just barely pulled himself to his feet. He looked in the mirror, his face molten with sweat and his eyes wide with terror. His bare chest pulsed furiously, the flesh rippling as a long segmented object, bent like an elbow or a knee, passed directly underneath it. He leaned in to vomit, and in the mixture of bile and water, he could see clots of blood and teeth. His teeth, floating in the once sparkling basin. He tried to speak again, but all that came out was a pathetic, desperate groan of fear. Again the voice, in David's own tone and words as clear as day, spoke to him. It was both reassuring and full of pity.
I'm sorry to do this, Davy, but don't worry. I'll be the best David Campbell I could ever be. Please, wait, I don't,
The last few words of Davy Campbell were choked as, from what he saw in the mirror, the fingertips of a hand appeared in the back of his throat. Mrs. Donovan looked out of her living room window, the summer sunshine pouring in unfiltered and clear. Underneath the cloudless blue sky, sitting on a riding mower, was David Campbell. He drove the mower up and down the wide expanse of greenery that made up the apartment complex lawn, making neat, even rows every few minutes. At passing cars he would wave, or to pedestrians on the walk he would tip his baseball cap. To think that just a few months ago, Campbell was a neighbour who would stumble in at all hours of the night, reeking of alcohol and God knows what else. He was unkempt and dirty, his disposition usually foul, and you would hear him cursing wildly at Mr. Kowalski, or the kids across the street, or to himself. Mrs. Donovan remembered how he had once visited the local police, and they took him out in handcuffs, the man himself a dishevelled, rambling mess. Once he had urinated in the flowers in front of her window while she and her husband were eating dinner. But now, he became a whole new man. He had lost quite a bit of weight, gotten a decent haircut, and had become almost overnight a friendlier, much gentler person. He explained that his behaviour had been part of a slump in his life, whatever that meant, and that he would now try to be a much more positive figure to everyone. David was known to always help out around the complex, shoveling snow, helping neighbours carry their groceries, bring their cans up from the curb and, of course, mowing the lawn for Mr. Kowalski when he was busy or sick. Although Mrs. Donovan, naturally a little untrusting at her age, hadn't come around to him right away. It was when Mr. Campbell purchased her some new flowers for her window garden that she had to admit he had changed. Under the bright summer sun, David J. Campbell wiped sweat from his head, took in a deep breath of fresh cut grass, and went with a whistle on his lips, back to work. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to click subscribe and check out some more stories here.